Mommy, why is the sky crying? Bryn Ashford looked down at her 4-year-old daughter Ivy, whose small hand clutched her own with trusting firmness. Rain pounded the pavement around them, turning the city streets into rivers of gray. Their umbrella had broken 3 blocks back, snapped by a gust of wind that felt personal, vindictive. Now they stood huddled under a shop awning that provided barely any shelter, both of them soaked through. "The sky's not crying, sweetheart," Bryn said softly, though her own voice trembled. "It's just having a hard day, like we are." At 29, Bryn had become an expert at translating despair into gentler words for her daughter. The eviction notice folded in her pocket, the art gallery that had promised to showcase her paintings but closed suddenly last week, the empty wallet, the bus that had just driven past without stopping, splashing them with dirty water, and always, always the ghost of Marcus, her husband, Ivy's father, who died 18 months ago in a construction accident, leaving them with love and memories, but no life insurance, no savings, nothing but each other. "I'm cold," Ivy whispered, shivering in her thin jacket. Bryn had given her daughter the warmer coat weeks ago, lying that she preferred lighter layers. "I know, baby. We'll get warm soon. I promise." Another promise she didn't know how to keep. The rain intensified, hammering the awning above them like accusatory fingers. Bryn pulled Ivy closer, trying to shield her with her own body. She closed her eyes against the sting of tears mixing with rain, wondering how much more she could endure, how much more she could ask this little girl to endure. "Excuse me? Are you two all right?" The voice cut through the storm, deep, concerned, belonging to a man in an expensive suit holding a large black umbrella. He was tall, maybe 33 or 34, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and eyes that looked like they understood standing in the rain, even if his clothes suggested he rarely had to. Bryn instinctively straightened, pride flaring even through her exhaustion. "We're fine, thank you." "You don't look fine," he said it gently, without judgment. "You both look freezing. There's a cafe 2 doors down. Could I buy you something warm? Coffee? Hot chocolate for the little one?" Every instinct screamed at Bryn to refuse. She didn't take charity. She didn't accept help from strangers. She had been managing, barely, desperately, but managing. And yet, Ivy's shivering intensified, her lips tinged blue at the edges. "Please," the man added, his voice softer. I remind you of someone, and I wish someone had stopped for them when they needed it." Something in those words, in the way his own hands trembled slightly despite the steady umbrella, made Bryn nod. "Okay, just to get warm. Thank you." The man smiled, relief evident on his face. "I'm Dashiell Carver." "Bryn, and this is Ivy." Dashiell held the umbrella over them as they walked, taking the brunt of the rain himself, and Bryn noticed. She noticed everything. The way his jaw tightened when Ivy coughed, the expensive watch on his wrist that he seemed unconscious of, and the sadness that lingered behind his politeness like smoke behind glass. The cafe was warm and bright, smelling of coffee and cinnamon. Dashiell ordered hot chocolate for Ivy with extra marshmallows, coffee for Bryn, and soup and sandwiches for both of them without asking if they were hungry. Bryn wanted to protest, but Ivy's eyes had lit up at the sight of food, and pride suddenly seemed less important than her daughter's empty stomach. "You didn't have to do all this," Bryn said quietly as they settled into a corner booth, Ivy already drinking her hot chocolate with desperate little sips. "I wanted to." Dashiell wrapped his hands around his own coffee cup, staring into it like it held answers. "Today's been a difficult day. Helping you helps me, if that makes sense." Bryn studied him more carefully. Beneath the polished exterior, she saw the same exhaustion she felt, the same barely held together quality. "What makes today difficult?" Dashiell was quiet for a long moment. "It's the anniversary. 3 years ago today, I lost my family. House fire. My parents, my younger sister. I wasn't there. I was away on business, building my company, chasing success. His voice fractured at the edges. And my girlfriend left 6 months after, said I was too broken to be with, too consumed by guilt. She wasn't wrong. Bryn's breath caught. I'm so sorry. I am too. Sorry that I wasn't there when they needed me. Sorry that I spent 3 years working myself into the ground, running from grief, building a company into something huge and successful, and completely hollow. He looked at Ivy, who was carefully arranging her marshmallows in a pattern. When I saw you two in the rain, I thought, maybe this is why I walked this direction today. Maybe this is the one thing I can do right. You did do something right, Bryn said softly. You stopped. Most people wouldn't have. They talked as Ivy ate and slowly stopped shivering. Bryn found herself telling Dashiell about Marcus, about the paintings she created late at night when Ivy was asleep, about the gallery that had been her hope and its sudden closure, about the eviction notice and the feeling of drowning on dry land. She told him things she hadn't told anyone because something about his brokenness matched her own, and broken things recognized each other. Can I see your work, your paintings? Bryn hesitated, then pulled out her phone, showing him photos of her art. They were landscapes mostly, but not pretty ones. They were paintings of grief rendered in color, stormy skies shot through with unexpected light, barren trees with single leaves clinging on, horizons that promised both endings and beginnings. They were raw and real and beautiful in their honesty.
Dashiell studied each image intently. These are extraordinary. They're not just paintings. They're emotions made visible. He looked up at her. The gallery that closed. They were fools. This work deserves to be seen. Deserving and reality are different things, Bryn said with a tired smile. Sometimes. Dashiell set down his phone carefully. Bryn, I know we just met, and this might sound crazy, but I own a technology company, Carver Industries. Our headquarters has a massive lobby that's currently displaying corporate art that everyone ignores. What if we displayed your work instead? 3 months, full exhibition. We'd handle everything. Framing, installation, publicity. You'd keep all proceeds from any sales. Bryn stared at him, unable to process the words. You can't be serious. I am, completely serious. I've been looking for a way to honor my sister. She loved art, wanted to be an artist herself. It could be something meaningful. For both of us. And my assistant, Jovi, has been telling me for months that we need to support local artists more. He pulled out his business card, sliding it across the table. Think about it. No obligation, but if you're interested, call me tomorrow. Bryn picked up the card with shaking hands. Dashiell Carver, CEO, Carver Industries, the companies whose logo she'd seen on buildings throughout the city. This was real. This man was real, and he was offering her a lifeline when she'd been drowning. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Dashiell's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the same question she asked herself every morning. How do I keep going when everything hurts? Because 3 years ago, someone should have been there for my family. Someone should have checked on them, helped them, seen them, and they weren't. I can't change that, but I can be the person who stops in the rain. I can be the person who sees you. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Be present for each other when the world feels like it's ending. Tears spilled down Bryn's cheeks. Thank you. You have no idea. Thank you. When they finally left the cafe, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Dashiell called a car service for them, insisting on paying for them to get wherever they needed to go safely. As they waited, Ivy looked up at him with solemn eyes. Are you sad too? She asked, with the devastating directness of children. Dashiell knelt down to her level. Yeah, sweetheart, I am sad. But meeting you and your mom today, it made me a little less sad. You helped me remember something important. What? Ivy asked. That even on rainy days, there are still good people in the world, And sometimes, if we're really lucky, we find each other exactly when we need to. The exhibition happened 6 weeks later. Dashiell had been true to his word. His assistant, Jovi, a warm woman in her 40s with a passion for emerging artists, had handled everything beautifully. Brin's paintings lined the lobby of Carver Industries, and the opening night was packed with collectors, critics, and curious employees. But the most meaningful moment came earlier that day, before the crowds arrived. Dashiell found Brin standing in front of her largest piece, a painting she'd titled "The Day the Sky Cried." It showed a woman and child under a broken umbrella, but above them, barely visible in the storm clouds, was a rift of blue sky breaking through. "I painted this the night after we met," Brin said quietly. "I realized something that day. I'd been so focused on surviving the storm that I'd forgotten to look for the breaks in the clouds. You were that break, Dashiell. You reminded me that help can come from unexpected places, that kindness still exists." Dashiell stood beside her, his throat tight. "I got something too. Purpose. I'd been so lost in grief and guilt, working constantly to avoid feeling anything. Helping you, seeing your art come to life here, it's the first thing that's felt meaningful since I lost them. I found out something last week. The gallery that closed, the owner embezzled funds and disappeared. But because I never signed the contract, I wasn't legally tied to any of his debts. If I'd gotten that exhibition like I'd hoped, I would have lost everything. The rain that day, the broken umbrella, the missed bus, it all led me to you, to this moment. Sometimes what feels like rock bottom is actually a foundation for something new." Dashiell smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time since they'd met. "My sister always said that too, that breakdowns are just breakthroughs in disguise." That evening, 3 of Brin's paintings sold, with several more on hold for interested buyers. The money wasn't life-changing, but it was hope-changing. It was breathing room. It was the ability to renew her apartment lease and buy Ivy the warm coat she needed. More than that, it was validation that her grief, her struggles, her truth translated into art mattered to people. Dashiell and Brin remained in each other's lives, not romantically, but as 2 people who'd found each other in a storm and decided to stay friends through calmer weather. He attended Ivy's preschool performances. She convinced him to start grief counseling. They shared holidays, traded stories, and slowly, together, learned that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. It meant carrying love with you in new ways. 2 years later, Brin's second exhibition opened at a prestigious gallery, and this time the title was Kindness in the Rain. Every painting explored moments of unexpected grace, strangers helping strangers, hands reaching out, umbrellas shared. At the center was a portrait of a man kneeling to speak to a child, titled "The Day Someone Stopped." At the opening, Dashiell stood in front of the portrait, his eyes wet. Ivy, now 6 and entirely comfortable with the art world crowd, tugged his hand. "Mr. Dashiell, do you remember when we met?" "Every detail, sweetheart." "Mommy says you saved us that day." Dashiell knelt down, just as he had that rainy afternoon 2 years ago. "You know what? I think you saved me, too. Sometimes when people help each other, both get rescued. That's the magic of kindness." Ivy considered this seriously. "Then we should all help each other more." "Yes," Dashiell said, his voice full of emotion.
We absolutely should. Sometimes life's greatest transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness. A stranger stopping in the rain, a hand extended, a moment of seeing another person struggle and choosing not to look away. We are all storms and sunshine both, carrying grief and hope in equal measure. But when we choose to be present for each other, to share our umbrellas, literal and metaphorical, we discover that we're never truly alone in the rain. Kindness isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, about seeing,
about remembering that every person we pass is fighting battles we know nothing about, and sometimes all they need is for someone to stop and say, "I see you. You're not alone. Let me help." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.